We'll leave you then.
It's very rude, you know, to read my thoughts, or Mr. Lynch's, without our permission.
Did you think you were the only one of your kind, young lady?
We're mutants, Jean. We are like you.
Really? I doubt that.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 213 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by my fellow mutants, Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, everyone.
So I haven't been offended by calling you mutants. After all, as we'll discover later on down the line, everything is a mutation.
Well, have you got something against mutants? Because you're apologising for it like there's something wrong.
Myself, so
just reminds me of that Seinfeld episode. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No. There's anything wrong with that, of course. No, never.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've got a cure in my pocket, and that's what we're going to refer to it as a cure.
Yeah.
Even though I say there's nothing wrong with it, but
Yeah.
But here's like the cure.
Yeah, here's the cure we've spent billions working on because it's such a horrible thing to be. But good luck to you.
Yeah, but good luck to you if you want it.
I mean, but honestly though, what would be like a better? Would antidote be a more applicable, or is that still like negative insinuation there?
To be honest, I'm not going to get all PC over this.
But I mean generally, if you had, in this world, and you had like the thing that makes them stop being mutants, what would you call it? What would be like a better term for it? That's the real question I have for today.
It's the ethical question. I can't say vaccine because obviously that's what we have for COVID at the moment, but that just implies protection, inoculation.
Well, let's ask our listeners: if you're a mutant and are worried about any cure being described in a non-PC fashion, write to us at expectustotalk@gmail.com. We'll get to the bottom of it. So anyway, what are we covering tonight, Becca?
Tonight, a juggernaut, bitch. Anyway. Oh my god!
You should see the deleted scenes. There was a deleted scene where Vinnie Jones runs through the wall, and he imitates Jack Nicholson in The Shining when he goes "Here's Chucky."
Here's Chucky.
It's
dear.
I really try to separate art from artist. I've talked about it on so many shows, but it's difficult when I never liked the guy to start with, because I remember him as a footballer, and he played for Wimbledon, a club called Wimbledon, for anyone not in this country. Now, there's a whole story about Wimbledon and them moving and becoming a bit of a franchise, which is a very
and the Wombles.
But they always used to play on this persona of we're the crazy gang, like they were a bit eccentric, and actually what they were was really fucking violent. There's stories of people like Gary Mabbott having his cheekbones smashed by them. Vinnie Jones was not a particularly good footballer, but he was just I'm a hard man on the pitch, and he was a twat. And then I remember listening to, I've often talked of the podcast, I'm trying to think if it was that one he was on. Was it School of Movies? It may have been a different one. But they interviewed Dominic Diamond.
Oh, wow.
And on one occasion, they had Vinnie Jones on Games Master or whatever it was called. What was it called? Was it called Games Master?
Yeah, it was Games Master back in the day. Yeah, it was.
And they just said there kept being delays in the recording, and every time they tried to get him out of his dressing room, he was like, "That's another £500 then." And he's just a fucking asshole.
He's a diva.
And they've put him. No, he's just a dickhead, and they've just, he's like a non-talented John Terry. And they put him in this film, and it's just I can't switch that off. It's like, how are you getting work? You're an asshole.
He'll probably he is Vinnie Jones, that's he's known for obviously being a football player, and he just made his career out of being a hard man. And if he's in a film, even here as he has a juggernaut, it's still Vinnie Jones, and it's just oh my god.
Yeah. So it's just, I found it very off-putting as a young kid, because like at the age of, even though I quite liked boxing and stuff like that, we were sort of talking off air about rugby and things like that. I don't like things where they're not meant to be violent and they're inadvertently violent. So I can't watch rugby because the aim is getting the ball over a line, and yet they've got smash nose, cauliflower ears, brain injuries, and I just think that's fucking ridiculous. At least in boxing, they're meant to be trying to knock each other out. And I felt the same way about Wimbledon. It was like football, and as a kid, I was kind of enchanted by it, and I liked watching it sort of played, in a pretty fashion. And then you had these bunch of twats just smashing people up all the time. I hated them.
It's just in. Dave hates rugby.
Yeah. Anyway, what are we covering tonight? What are we covering tonight, Becca?
I had to get that out of my system because it's just I've got damn cheesy.
So what you're saying is you really, really like and admire Vinnie Jones. That's basically
I do.
The crux of him.
Well, he's a
Dave's favourite.
It's amazing how far you can get with no discernible talent. I think is the lesson he teaches us, and how inspiring that is.
Well, if he can do it.
I didn't like any of that team. Like Dennis Wise went on to go to Chelsea, and he always looked like he was on the verge of like losing his rag. He had these mental eyes. I didn't like him at all. But what are we covering tonight, Becca?
Tonight, it's all about X-Men: The Last Stand, starring Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, Ian McKellen, Famke Janssen, Patrick Stewart, Anne Paquin, James Marsden, Kelsey Grammer, Rebecca Romijn, Vinnie Jones, and Elliot Page. The score by John Powell, script by Simon Kinberg and Zach Penn, directed by Brett Ratner, and released in 2006.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on this. We touched on this last week. This is Brett Ratner because the previous
guy
director,
buggered off to make a Superman
Bryan
film.
Singer went off to do Superman Returns. Now, that we told that story on the Superman series, that there was a whole 6 or 7 year period where they were trying to launch a Superman film, longer than that actually, more like 8 years. And you had Kevin Smith writing scripts, you had Nicolas Cage involved for a while, you had Brett Ratner involved for a while, you had McGee, all these sorts of things. Anthony Hopkins was going to be Jor-El.
Wolfgang Peterson. There's going to be like a Superman
Batman versus Superman
film.
And that was likely to have been Colin Farrell and Jude Law, I believe. Whether it would have been any good, I don't know, but the version we got wasn't any good, so it doesn't really matter. But the interesting thing about it is they spent 8 years trying to almost reimagine Superman. To bring something out that was nothing like the Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner era. And then Bryan Singer pitches a continuation of that era and produces the closest thing to a mid-2000s Christopher Reeve film. Quality you can talk about, but certainly look, feel, sound, everything. It was a continuation. And but of course that left this series in the lurch, and I get a little bit confused in the backstory of this, because you have Bryan Singer, who ended up doing Superman, you had J.J. Abrams, who ended up doing Mission Impossible 3 this year, and you ended up with Brett Ratner doing this, and I think at some point they were all on each other's properties. Because originally this obviously would have been Bryan Singer, J.J. Abrams was involved in Superman, Brett Ratner was obviously did this, but was at one point involved with it. I think Joe Carnahan originally was going to do Mission Impossible as well.
Yeah, I think David Fincher as well was Mission Impossible 3 as well. He was like, had talks about doing it.
Yeah. I mean. He's been linked to a few things over the years that you think, I can't imagine him doing that, but he's a very talented filmmaker, so who knows. But if you read around now, it doesn't take you very long to come across slightly salty quotes from Matthew Vaughn on this film, because Matthew Vaughn, obviously, because films have to be, sets have to be built and effects have to be planned and costumes have to be worked out and everything else, quite often it's storyboarded before like a script is finished. It storyboards all its main set pieces, the beats, you've got a treatment, and Matthew Vaughn says that the treatment was 90% done by him, not the treatment, the storyboards were all done, and it was largely his story. But when he got to the end result, he said it's not what I would have done. He said my version would have been very similar, but it would have been like 40 minutes longer for a start. And he said they've just cut all the heart out of what I was planning to do. But of course we'll see how Matthew Vaughn handles an X-Men film in a couple of weeks' time. But I think it's fair to say will be kinder to that than will be to this one tonight. But they brought Brett Ratner in. Now, Brett Ratner was best known for what at this point? Rush Hour?
Yeah, he's done a few things. I think Rush Hour is probably his biggest hit.
Red Dragon.
Didn't he do a film with... Yes. That was kind of like his step out of like... He usually does sort of like action comedy kind of like, or light kind of action type sort of things. There's film he did with Pierce Brosnan as a thief.
After the Sunset.
And Seven High.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've not seen it. But then outside of Bond, I don't want anyone, for all the things I've said over the years, I'm not actually a Pierce Brosnan hater. I just don't necessarily think he was the best Bond. But I've actually enjoyed him in quite a few things outside of Bond. I think he's just more relaxed. It almost like the nerves got to him as Bond. I don't know. But whether you like or hate him as Bond, I've got nothing against him. But at the same time, I'm not like a Brosnan completist because he played Bond. So I don't even know if I've seen After the Sunset. I've certainly not seen The Matador. I've only seen about half of The November Man, and I was left completely unsmegging gripped. So I didn't really bother with that. But I mean, the only films I've really, really loved of his is I liked his Thomas Crown Affair, and I really liked The Tailor of Panama. That's a terrific film, or it was when I saw it like 19 years ago or whatever it was. Brett Ratner had done 2 Rush Hour films by this point. He'd done Red Dragon, which will always suffer next to Manhunter because it's the same story done poorly. But it wasn't horrendous at the same time. He can sort of approximate. He's a bit like a low-budget J.J. Abrams. He can sort of approximate other filmmakers, just not quite as well.
He's kind of basically like a generic director, as what I put him as. He hasn't really got like a distinct voice of his own. He's just kind of like, you know, he'd show up and kind of do kind of what's that kind of asked, I think. So I don't know if he's got like maybe like a reputation of being like delivering on time and in budget kind of thing, and that's kind of why he gets work.
Yeah, I mean, I know that certainly in my opinion, there are plenty of erratic filmmakers out there. You don't know what you're going to get. One's good, one's bad. You're not sure. I suppose Bryan Singer now would fall into that category. I think Brett Ratner's the same, but the top of his game is like reasonably mediocre. The reason I say that is like Rush Hour's kind of fucking irritating, but it's okay. He did a film called The Family Man with Nicolas Cage, which was kind of almost like a modern version of something, trying to be a modern version of a sort of It's a Wonderful Life. A guy gets to see, you know, in that case, or perhaps even a bit of Scrooge about it, in that he's a driven businessman who gets to see this family life he never got to have because he like mistreated or left Taya Leone years before, and he's shown an alternative life where they got together and have children and stuff, and it's okay. The trailers made it look better than it actually was. The end result was moderately disappointing, but it was okay. Red Dragon I thought was pretty weak. After the Sunset I'd not seen. This one we'll talk about tonight, and then a lot of people talk positively of Tower Heist, but I've not seen it. Have you?
I've seen it. It's okay. I think it's only probably worth watching in with Eddie Murphy being slightly on form, like returning, because he's very sort of, it's a bit more like, you know, how Eddie Murphy used to be. He's very sort of like, you know, loud and sweary, whereas like usually he puts on a fat suit and plays half the cast, you know.
I suppose that Dolomite Is My Name's another example of a film like that, that when Eddie Murphy looks anywhere close to form, the film ends up getting a bit overrated because we miss that man.
Yeah.
But then the film,
it's almost like worth seeing though, just for him. If when he like, it's almost like when you say talk about Bruce Willis, like, you know, I'm only interested when he wants to be there. You know, it's like it's something like he feels passionate about.
Same with Anthony Hopkins. Same with a lot of actors. Yeah. The film I'd forgotten he did was Hercules in 2014 with Dwayne Johnson. And that was one of those. It was one of those I almost walked out of. And again, very rarely. I've only ever walked out of about 4 or 5 things. Now, for some people,
where did you walk out of that one? Because that just seems like the most inoffensive thing in the world.
I didn't walk out of it, but I'm saying when I walk out of something, it's never like throw my popcorn down in disgust. It's always like I'm really fucking bored. And actually, some of the worst experiences I've had in a cinema, I haven't. Like Russell Crowe Noah film. I got to the end of the film and my friend said to me, I wanted to go after about half an hour, and I said, I wish you'd said, because I fucking hated that. But the Hercules film was a bit like that. I was just painfully fucking bored by it, and I was just like, what am I even doing here? This is shit. I should have known it. It's a Brett Ratner film.
I think I felt similar with the Lost Airbender. It was the only time I've ever thought of walking out. For the exact same reason, I just thought, what's the fucking point? This is just awful. My mind, it's like I stuck with it for the end just for the sake of it, but on that principle. But yeah, no, I thought the entire thing, I thought it was god awful.
He also directed a segment of movie 43, which is up there as like one of the worst films ever made. Now, I've not seen it. I saw a trailer for it, and I saw a couple of isolated clips, and I went, absolutely no way. But he did it. I mean, isn't there a section where like, what's he called? Hugh Jackman has like a pair of balls on his chin or something. I don't know. It's really shit. But he did the section Happy Birthday. Now I'm just going to read the couple of sentences that describe it on Wikipedia. Pete captures a leprechaun for his roommate Bryan as a birthday present. After tying the leprechaun up in the basement, they demand he give them a pot of gold. The obscene leprechaun threatens his brother is coming to save him. When he arrives, Bryan and Pete are shot at, ultimately kill both leprechauns. At the end of the segment, Pete reveals he also caught a fairy who performs fellatio for gold coins. Starring Gerard Butler and Sean William Scott. It's just... Again, this pushes me to the limit of my can I separate art from artist, because Brett Ratner's not a very nice man. And I've never met him, obviously, but if a tenth of what is said about him is true, then he's a very arrogant, self-serving mistreater of women. Nothing,
so half Hollywood then?
Nothing deeply criminal, just deeply sleazy. We're not talking, as far as I know, we're not talking anything criminal here. We're just talking about what a pig you really are. Zach Penn is involved in the story again, which is very, very similar to before, but this is the first entry in the series for Simon Kinberg. Now, Simon Kinberg directed Dark Phoenix, which I think we'll mock when we get there, because he's effectively done the same film again, sort of. But he writes a lot of the stuff going forward, and I think the scripts struggle. I mean, he's a producer on X-Men. He's a writer on this. When it gets to First Class, he's not a writer, he's just a producer. And First Class has a pretty good script. But he wrote Days of Future Past, which is decent, but it's got problems. He wrote Apocalypse. He wrote Dark Phoenix. But then he didn't write Logan. So basically he's nothing executive to do with any of the good ones. And he's just like a bit of a piss stain over the worst ones. But yeah. So change of director this week, change of writer this week. I think I'm right in saying change of cinematographer this week. But again, the cinematographer, what's he called? Dante Spinotti. He did LA Confidential, he did The Insider, Frankie and Johnny, he did
Manhunter, funnily enough.
Manhunter, Wonder Boys. So yeah,
I was going to say, whatever you think of this film in terms of script or direction, at least it looks good.
It looks absolutely fine. He did Public Enemies for Michael Mann
it's
as well.
weird. So he shot Red Dragon and Manhunter.
Yeah. So when we go forward and see if he did Dark Phoenix as well, he must get...
We needed Brian Cox in this film. So last week, we needed him in this film.
I just need to see if he did that as well, because if that's the case, he gets quite a lot of deja vu on sets. No, he didn't do that one, actually.
Yeah, if you just like watch, if you just like comparison, like watch like the same scenes like for like that was in Manhunter and Red Dragon, you can kind of tell the kind of director Brett Ratner is. He's just plain static. He's... and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a negative thing, but you can just sort of tell that he's kind of, his style is very vanilla.
His biggest plus
is quite a bland style, isn't it? Unfortunately,
his biggest plus is he gets out of the way of the material,
it's just not showy. It's not like
no, quite understated.
It's not like he's got any. Yeah, I think if like I don't think he puts much thought in his shots.
Yeah.
But he probably but it's just about like making sure that works and that flows. That's probably.
Maybe we should do the Hannibal Lecter films and do the compare and
contrast. We
contrast.
will do the Hannibal Lecter films at some point.
And look away during the gory bits.
Music this time is John Powell, and I honestly think unless it's a really lazy sort of obituary where they just pick the latest thing he did, they will say born composer John Powell has died today at the age of whatever it happens to be, because I think that's what he'll be best remembered for. He did the original Bourne trilogy. He did Jason Bourne. I'm just looking to see. He didn't do the spin-off with Budget Daniel Craig. What's he called?
Jeremy Ratner.
That's it. Budget Daniel Craig.
Ratner,
Basically,
yeah.
if you ordered like Daniel Craig from Wish, Jeremy Renner would turn up. he's like Daniel Craig when he's been smashed about the face a bit more. So there's actually reasonably
that's a bit harsh.
There's reasonably accomplished cast involved in this. A trio of directors who've been involved in things like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes was one of them that I spotted. Showgirls. Showgirls, great. Oh God, the Pink Panther films. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, but we do have a decent cast here. Running time. We're back to the sort of running time of the first film.
Those Pink Panther remakes, like seriously, who thought they were a good idea? Like,
the first one surprised me.
Where was even the demand for them? I can't imagine like it was like I know what I really want to see. I want to see I want to see like Steve Martin actually sort of play John Detective Clouseau.
The first one, my expectations were so low. And I laughed a few times, so I thought, well, this is okay. I mean, is it like the better ones? No. But by the end, like, Peter Sellers was doing crap ones near the end, so it was okay. It was all right. Then I went to watch the sequel, which I believe had John Cleese in it, and it was painful. It was like watching like the worst bits of like a Johnny English film or something.
Mm.
But what we will say about this is it's still sort of under the auspices of Lawrence Schuler Donner. It's still the same sort of cast. It's same production company, same set, same everything. So it does feel a cohesive part of the series. I think the first thing I'd point out, though, if I haven't already said it, is this is 104 minutes. And whilst I think we all like a good tight running time, when you're knocking half an hour off the last film, I think we'll see this film's just slightly rushed in the way it feels, but its budget's been significantly raised. The budget.
I wonder if part of it's got to do with the fact that where they're on the Golden Gate Bridge, like night comes really quickly. Like there's a scene where it's like broad daylight, and then in the next scene it's nighttime.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I wonder if
quickly make it night. We don't have to animate as much.
Literally, he's there sort of saying, "Oh, nothing will stop us, rah rah," and then literally in the next scene, "Oh, it's nighttime," and it's just like, "Oh."
I noticed it this time. And when the sun's going, when you do see it a sort of vaguely twilight, it looks really fake. But we'll get to it. This film has.
We'll come to it. Sorry to jump.
No, this film has, I would say, weaker effects than last week, and that's partly because I think it's more ambitious. It's trying to do more, and it doesn't always work.
I think there are some in the bigger scenes. Some of like the smaller scenes are okay, but some of the big the big money shots, as I call them, I think perhaps obviously one technology, modern TVs, one thing another, and with upscaling, perhaps they don't come off well. But otherwise,
listeners,
right so well.
If you're not sure what Becca's talking about, just Google money shots.
You know what I mean.
Google image search money shots. That'll clear it all
Here's
up
the money.
for you.
Yeah, no.
And funnily enough, a lot of those pictures require a bit of a clean up as well.
What I'm on about, sorry.
The budget is anywhere between 85 and 100 million more than the last film, depending on which source you believe. And it took about 460, which is the highest grossing until, I think, Days of Future Past, but don't hold me to that. So that's background on it. I saw it in the cinema on opening night. Again, I think I was all in on them at this point. And it was one of those summers we get it now and again. I'm trying to think what now without looking. But certainly Superman Returns, but I can't think what else. But there were a number of films that year I was kind of excited about. So it was, it kicked off with like X-Men in May, and I was like, great, I'm in for like a great summer here. So I was kind of excited to go and see this. A couple of years later, going to see, I think it may have been Iron Man, and I was sat a couple of seats away from a young, well, he was comic book man in human form, and he started getting a little bit annoyed at the end of the film, or was he pleased at the end of the film? I can't forget which. He had a visceral response at the end of whatever film we were watching that was comic book related, and I have a feeling it was positive. And he actually told me, seemingly proud, that he was thrown out of X-Men The Last Stand because he was so vocally pissed off at the end of the film. I mean, this guy was about 22, I reckon, and they just like kicked him out because he was like, you know, worst X-Men movie ever. Yeah, so
Worst movie ever.
This got pretty weak reviews, but when I say weak, I'm just looking for its Rotten Tomatoes score, 57%. So it's only like 3 or 4% below like something like The Phantom Menace, which when there's anticipation for a film, a lot of people almost struggle to believe they're watching something poor, so they kind of hedge their bets and give a 3-star review or something. So I think its reputation is now worse than that 57%, but I dare say that's a similar sort of approval rating as something like Man of Steel. And I would say Man of Steel is a stronger film than this, but, you know, we can debate that when we get to that film, I suppose. But yeah, I saw it and I thought it was okay. I certainly didn't have a visceral hatred of it. I just thought it was like... I thought it was an X-Men film on fast forward. And I'm kind of straying into my opening thoughts here, really. I thought it was an X-Men film with a load of good constituent parts kind of mixed into the wrong order. So if you're going to kill Scott, don't do it in like one of the first couple of scenes of the film. I felt like we were skipping scenes. Like there may have been a scene in between that would have a bit of heart, but we skip over it and get to the next bit. And all of a sudden we're in Act 3. And what was put in front of me was okay. I like it less now than I liked it at the time, certainly. But it just seemed like, it did seem like a half-decent X-Men film with all its heart stripped out, therefore not a very good X-Men film. What about you guys?
Becca?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember kind of being, you know, there for it kind of back in the day. I think I probably saw it a couple of times at the cinema, just so I got dragged by sort of friends to go and see it. And also, Kelsey Grammer is a really big draw for me in this film. I think it's brilliant that he's Beast. I think that's fantastic. But yeah, this time around, I sort of watched it.
Don't you think it's missing like David Hyde Pierce, like done up as a lion? It is,
yeah, I do miss that. Yeah, I was missing the Frasier reference.
Or like, you know, in Teen Wolf,
Jane Leaves popping up.
You know, in Teen Wolf, where he turns into a wolf for the first time, and his dad's knocking on the door, and when he opens the bathroom door, his dad's there as like an elderly werewolf. Shouldn't we have had John? I know all about it. Shouldn't we have John Mahoney as a really great elderly beast with his cane?
Or blue.
Yeah.
Great blue tint.
So sorry, yeah. Kelsey Grammer was a draw for me, I must admit. Yeah.
No, I just think that's fantastic. That's a genius piece of casting, I think. And it's fantastic, I reckon. Yeah, so yeah, I remember watching this film ages ago and thinking, oh, this is a load of rubbish, you know. But now we're watching it sort of critically, or trying to cast a like half critical eye. It is very rushed. Some of the effects really don't hold up during the big money shots as they are. Ian McKellen does ham it up fantastically as Magneto, definitely. But yeah, it is. You know, I was amazed. I was surprised by the, you know, sort of 1 hour 45 running time, and was like, wow, okay, this is a quick one. But it does, you know, it does move along, you know, at quite the pace. It doesn't kind of let you breathe very much. And it does kind of feel as if, you know, they tried to get out there as quickly as they could, and it does sort of lack a little bit in terms of like sort of plot and character development. Some, you know, because of its short run time, or relatively short run time, things do fall by the wayside a little bit. And then you've got obviously day passing into night really quickly, which speeds things up a little bit. But no, I still enjoyed it. This is kind of where it starts to go downwards a little bit. It's still quite funny. You know, got some good lines. No, I did write them all down, but they've all escaped me now. But yeah, there's a line between like Beast and Wolverine where he's like, oh, you know, I've been doing X, Y, Z since before you had claws and things like that. And they're just some funny little lines. And obviously, Vinnie Jones is Juggernaut. Oh my god, hums it up. Just cringe your way through his scenes.
Matthew Vaughn for that, because you want to cast him.
Really, really good. So really enjoyed that.
Matthew Vaughn what?
he thanked Matthew Vaughn for casting Vinnie Jones because that was part of the casting thing for him.
Yeah, that's kind of his legacy, wasn't it? I've got a fun fact coming up about that one, but
Thanks.
his sort of
fucking
casting legacy.
Dennis Wise as Wolverine.
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer, Vinnie Jones, and the chap who plays Angel, where he's trying to hack off his wings.
And Jason Statham as Xavier.
Yeah, just to interrupt to say, this is the first thing I ever saw Ben Foster in.
That was it. I can remember his name. Apologies.
Ben Foster has been in loads of things, but two things that spring to mind is he was one of the bad guys in the remake of 3:10 to Yuma, and really quite nasty in it. But about 3 or 4 years ago, he played Lance Armstrong in a biopic of everything that happened with Lance Armstrong and the drug taking and all that sort of thing. And he was quite eerily like him as well. So Ben Foster's quite a talent. And
yeah, he's really good. He's really good character actor. I think whatever he pops up in, he always kind of adds value to that production.
I think there are two things I just want to point out that might explain a couple of things here. 210 million budget, according to Wikipedia and other sources I've read. This was I thought Spider-Man. No, it must have been Spider-Man 3 that was 225 then, because I thought Spider-Man 2 was.
Yeah, it must have been more expensive.
It says it was the most expensive film to be made until Dead Man's Chest came along. That was worth the money, wasn't it? But shooting began in August 2005 and wrapped in January 2006. The film came out in May. That's very rushed for an effects-heavy film, isn't it? So I think that's part of the problem, and I think when we're going to be sort of summarising that whatever the positives of this film, it all feels a bit rushed. It is like they're retrofitting. Let's just get something out for that date, and they've got together a relatively cohesive story with all its problems. But that sounds to me at 210 million budget, the effects should be pretty damn good, and they're not bad, but the problems, and I think they were clearly rushing it, and it must be that Matthew Vaughn dropped out late. Does anyone know why Matthew Vaughn dropped out? I can't remember.
I think it was like family or scheduling issues, I think. Just like private issues, I think, was the story at the time. I can't remember the exact reason, but yeah, sort of private or scheduling conflicts, I imagine.
He met Claudia Schiffer and couldn't believe his luck. So I'm not coming to work. Yeah. All right, so I'm just looking to see if I can find
He's
it.
otherwise engaged.
So he dropped out.
Let's phone him up. Hello? No.
Yeah, 1 month later, studio. So the filming was due February 2005. They still had no director, and they announced a release date for about 3 weeks earlier than it did come out. It's due to start July 2005 in Vancouver. 1 month after that, so what would that be? March 2005, they signed Matthew Vaughn and pushed the release date back. He made some casting. Family issues led him to withdraw before filming began. Vaughn was also cautious of the tight deadlines imposed by Fox, stating he didn't have time to make the movie I wanted to make. So he drops out, having been due to start in July. They lose another month when they bring on Brett Ratner. Brett Ratner doesn't have time to put anything on it himself, really. So it says
picking up the pieces, really, isn't he? After everybody else,
he just had to trust his writers because he didn't know anything of the X-Men. And so I think that what we're saying is that's possibly why the script feels rushed, but also the effects feel a bit incomplete in places. Now that isn't always film breaking, because X-Men First Class was done from start to finish in about 11 months and has some ropey effects, but it doesn't matter. But then Apocalypse was rushed and has terrible effects. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it seems to be that whatever it is they do as a sort of, in treating this as a project to be managed, they seem to always end up with a really truncated schedule. And that's what's happened here as well.
Yeah, because wasn't First Class, that was like a short.
I think it was out 11 months after it was announced. Now obviously some work had gone on behind the scenes, but I don't think they'd even started filming at that point. And in fact, things like January Jones casting happened after that announcement. So I think it was rather rushed. And we know Apocalypse was. And it just speaks to a lack of care that you haven't had a film out since 2003. You had plenty of time to get your ducks in a row on this.
Yeah, it was just too much, too much too quickly. They just kind of rushed. Obviously, went through lots of chops and changes, and just went. They had to get something out. And unfortunately, it just fell to Brett Ratner, sadly. But they kind of couldn't line everything up in time. This is what we're left with, and what else can we do? Here we are talking about it. So,
what did you make of it, Chris?
Yeah, I'm kind of a bit conflicted really about it because in some ways this is very much a weaker film than the other two, and I think that was my first reaction after coming out of it. I was kind of thinking, I was looking at, I wish Bryan Singer would, was able to finish off this film like Evil. I wish he'd stayed on to finish this, or I wish Fox would have waited to let him finish it off, kind of thing. Now I'm a little bit weird because I kind of, if you gave me a choice out of the three we've reviewed, I'd probably prefer to watch this one. And I know that sounds like almost like heresy for some people.
I fell off my chair.
I mean, well, like Ted Danson. But I don't know. I think it's kind of mixed. I mean, but in the same breath, I recognise the fact that the actual quality has dropped. I'm not going to sort of try and convince anyone that this is like a better film than the other two. It's kind of has interesting ideas, and I think a lot of that is probably from the Matthew Vaughn, because I quite like Matthew Vaughn quite a lot. And I think, and by sounds of it, what Matthew Vaughn's actually said, it probably is like all the interesting stuff is probably from like his draft or his ideas. That it's just like pushed into this kind of, very lightweight, very sort of, very quick, very sort of like, just like run of the mill kind of film. And with that, it's very easy to intake and it's very easy watch, but it's very unfulfilling at the same time. But then it has some interesting stuff. Particularly any stuff with Magneto, I think is great. I think how they, the stuff with like the quote unquote the Cure, how he turns on Mystique, and the whole. His whole attitude towards in the sense that he sees mutants as better, and that's all he cares about. And then for him to actually have that taken away is like perfect way to end that character's arc. It's like there's stuff in that I just think that's great. That is generally that's well, I wouldn't say done well, but but when you see, but in the grand scheme of things, you think. That's exactly how it should have been.
It's not treated with a total lack of care, and I think I've always said, well, I've not always said. I think I thought about it last year when we first talked about doing this series. Like I said in the first episode, I kind of break the films that I've seen into roughly sort of 3 segments. This is in the shit ones, but it's like so much better than the other 2 shit ones that it almost doesn't belong there, and it's certainly. Of the poorer entries, it's the one I had the least visceral bad reaction to. Whereas like X-Men Origins Wolverine we'll talk about next week, because I had a really strange reaction to that. And Apocalypse, I was really shocked. I mean, you come out of X2 in the first 2 films, and because the preoccupations and subtexts of those films are so in line with what we know Singer had an interest in, you think of it as his series. Well, it got to a point that when he came back for Days of Future Past, I was just disappointed it wasn't Matthew Vaughn. The guy wasn't the same filmmaker anymore, and actually, some of the best work wasn't his. So I wish this had been Matthew Vaughn, given the time he wanted. So if he felt he needed 6 months, stick it out in the Bond slot, sort of end of October, beginning of November or something. Actually, they would have gone up against Casino Royale then, so that might have been a bad idea. But you take my point, put it out at Christmas or something, give him the time that he needs, because Matthew Vaughn over the years has proved at very least to be a solidly entertaining filmmaker, whereas Brett Ratner just seems somewhat bland to me.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what it is. It's kind of very... Ultimately, it's just very throwaway. It almost feels like a wasted opportunity. There is, on the other hand, on the probably more negative side, there's the stuff with Jean Grey, particularly. I mean, and this is kind of what fans of the X-Men comics would probably side with me on this, really.
Yeah.
Well, in reality, I'm probably just sort of copying their homework, and I'm sort of speaking on behalf of them to try to. But the whole idea of Jean Grey as this like mega mutant, but it's just like suppressing this part, doesn't really work. I mean, especially when you put it in the context of this idea of mutants, like in a parallel of rights, human rights kind of thing, and and then there's a cure, and what's the ethics in that, these are all interesting questions. But when you have when in the same film you have literally a mutant, which is mutants are supposed to be something you can't control, you're just born with it, it's like evolution. But when you have a mutant which is meant to be so powerful, almost godlike, but someone who is unable to control that power almost to disastrous effect, what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? It kind of falls, it kind of it kind of almost doesn't belong, and it also it kind of just pisses over the Jean Grey character as well, and to top all off with the. To a bit of context, in the comics, Jean Grey isn't this super mutant who's unable to control her powers kind of thing. The Phoenix is this sort of entity that comes on a galaxy somewhere, which is drawn to Jean. It kind of embodies her. When she kind of what happens in the other film, but in the later film, but later film kind of does the same thing. Anyway, that's getting into it.
We'll get back to that, because it has it plays on some of the problems that I've got with badly done team up films anyway. But we'll get we see it again, particularly with Apocalypse. Yeah. I just want to say we have never killed a celebrity this fast, guys. I mentioned Richard Donner about 12 minutes ago, and he was announced as dead 5 minutes later.
Oh, fucking hell, really?
Yeah, Richard Donner has passed away.
R.I.P. Dick
Donner. Yeah, I've just seen it from Charlie, actually, long time contributor to this show. Charlie just posted it on this Facebook page. I've just checked Variety.
We've just done Lethal Weapon as well, haven't we?
Variety were in Variety.
There's supposed to be a new record.
Well, actually, Variety announced it 17 minutes ago at the time of recording, if
you
look at their site.
Let's get Superman on. Come on, let's do it.
So we mentioned Lawrence Shirley Donner and Dick Donner around the time Variety were writing that, so we didn't kill him, but again, another...
we never actually killed anybody, it's just we happened to mention it. Unfortunately, they passed away.
I mean, he was in his 90s, to be fair, but...
He was 90, he was born in April of 1930, so he was 91.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear. That's a ripe old age,
Well, as I always said, he was eminent career. And a very eclectic one as well, there was so
much variety.
Not many sort of directors have done the sort of films that...
he's covered all, most if not all genres. He's worked with a whole bunch of people.
Horror, comedy, buddy cop, superhero,
action, superhero, cop movies, everything.
And
he's done it all.
At least somewhat good at all of them.
Yeah, he's done it all. He leaves a very long shadow.
Except the Goonies, but I'll forgive him.
Oh God.
Well, other people like it. So
other people like it. Yeah, so
it's just us. It's just us two, Dave.
It is just me and you.
You're the weirdos.
And he did various TV shows as well. I know he worked on The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And a couple of other things. I believe. No, I am looking at it now. I don't want to cheat. I knew that one, but I'm looking, and it does say The $6 Million Man, The Fugitive, Kojak. And he directed several episodes of Danger Island, part of the children's series The Banana Splits.
No.
Wow.
So yeah, we've covered his Superman films, which is technically only the first one, but obviously he did a lot of the second one, and there's a Donner cut that we referred to. So I dare say 2 Superman films. We covered all four of his Lethal Weapon films, and we did Scrooged as our Christmas commentary a couple of years ago. So yeah, we've covered about 7 of his films, and obviously Lauren Schuler Donner is a producer on all of these, his wife. So
Awful.
the most
Awful.
the most eclectic one example of a film he did is he did The Toy, the Richard Pryor comedy. And I've always complained Richard Pryor was never captured properly by Hollywood. It's maybe stir crazy, but not very often. The Toy is actually
I
surprisingly
think he was too much
quite
of a
funny.
genius, I think, to be captured by Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you know, you don't get great George Carlin films, do you? Do you know what I mean? Some people just aren't designed for that. But,
No.
Yeah. So anyway, that's goodbye to Richard Donner.
Oh, that is such a shame. This year, oh my god.
So anyway, back to
Anyway.
back to appraising the work
Back to
of Brett Ratner.
So back to another dick. Yes. So as I was saying, so for context, to put it broadly speaking, in the comics, the Dark Phoenix saga is kind of born out this entity that gets drawn into Jean after like a near-death experience. There's much more deeper history in that, obviously. So,
but that's that's sort of the way they go with the Dark Phoenix film. With this film, it's kind of born into her.
Because and to be fair, and this kind of get what I was going to say about the love angle, which by the time we get to the end of the climax of the film, and you have Wolverine telling Jean "I love you," I couldn't be more nonplussed about a romance about anyone. And then given this is the third film,
I was like, oh.
While I think of it, Chris, if you've got a favourite love angle, write to us and expect us to talk at gmail.com.
I love, but do you know what I mean? And to be fair on Brett Ratner, this isn't all down on him because we've had this is the third film now. You had previous 2 films to set all this up, and I've got to be honest, I felt nonplussed about the romance angle on those films as well. So, and that speaks for the Dark Phoenix saga. It was literally just like, oh, last film, Jean is struggling with her powers, and then she sacrificed herself, and then all of a sudden, Dark Phoenix. You know what I mean? It's there isn't a lot to go on, so I don't blame the makers for having to just sort of come up with something, because to come up with there's this this space entity that sort of, in space is just probably a bit much to explain, even in like a 2 hour 30-minute movie. But anyway, so in summary, entertaining, rushed, a bit haphazard, but has some interesting stuff in it.
I think the point is this film, for all its heart in places, and it does have some, it doesn't feel authored in quite the same way. And when you go and watch Brett Ratner's career, I don't think he's ever once elevated anything. He's never once brought anything to a film that you don't think there's a lorry load of directors who could do that. If even a Michael Bay, I don't like Michael Bay's work very much at all. But I can spot, even as a non-filmmaker, even as not someone who's had not a day of film training in my life, I can spot some very obvious technical talent there. And with Brett Ratner, I just see a very obvious work-a-day filmmaker.
So but you actually see people trying to be like Michael Bay. Do you know what I mean? There is he does have a signature, and he does have like a trademark thing that.
But it isn't just people getting out of cars at sort of sundown and putting glasses on or whatever. It isn't just that. He's actually a pretty decent shot maker. I don't like his stuff at all, but Brett Ratner, I've never seen what it is that, I mean, because he's always, certainly before all this stuff sort of broke about him, he was always linked with very high budget stuff, and it's like the directing equivalent of Orsi and Kurtzman. That it's like, well, I think Orsi and Kurtzman are worse pound for pound, but some of their stuff's fairly serviceable, and I hear they're okay on TV, but you're just like, how did you get to do this? There must be so many more talented people out there than him.
There's been a thing. I've been thinking about along these sort of lines. It's like, is movies entertainment, or is it art, or is it product?
Oh, it's
or
product.
Is it,
it's pure product at this end.
Do you know what I mean? And I think there's like that line kind of like there's a bit of mixture in everything, and there's some that's more entertainment and product than others, and some that's more art. Well, I mean, it's all product then, but there's some that's more art and and entertainment comes in, whereas Brett Ratner is probably product.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll do it. I can get you that film done in this period of time.
Yeah,
probably. But I'm struggling to see where he ever transcended anything. Like the best he ever is like serviceable enough. But I mean, there were worse out there. I mean, Paul W.S. Anderson, I think, is a worse filmmaker. I think Stephen Sommers. I mean, his films were just as loud and big as he could physically make them, and they got really obnoxious. I found like Van Helsing unwatchable, and I mean literally unwatchable. I switched it off within an hour because I thought like Kate Beckinsale was doing a fucking comedy skit. But anyway, shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what Stephen Sommers doing these days.
Well, I think that's part of the point, isn't it? I mean, I'll look him up now, but has he been linked with anything recently? I'll look him up anyway. We'll get to him. But he's done. Well, his last two films have been Scorpion King. Oh no, not as a director. His last film was a film in 2013 called Odd Thomas, which is based on a Dean Koontz novel. Can't comment on that. He did the G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, and his last film before that was Van Helsing, which was unwatchable dreck. He did the first two Mummy films.
His career needs a shot on the arm.
The two Mummy films were okay. I don't really remember Deep Rising.
The Deep Rising's fun enough. Jungle Book I actually quite enjoyed it when I was seeing that cinema. But,
serviceable.
Yeah, I remember they did a live action one in the 90s, yeah. I thought, Catch Me If You Can. It's not that Catch Me If You Can, it's about 13 years before that. So he didn't direct. I mean, normally a named director does the first one and then like acts as a producer on like the sequels that are straight to DVD. He did it the other way round. He didn't direct the Scorpion Kings, but he did the lazy spin-offs. No, he didn't. Sorry, he didn't. He was an exec on those as well. My mistake. I did just say that, actually. So he's only done two films since Van Helsing in 2004. So, obviously, his stock fell through the floor quite quickly. Anyway. So, yeah, Brett Ratner's, as a filmmaker, not all bad, but there's not much about him that stands out. What I will say, though, is, for all its flaws, I quite like the opening scene of this film.
Yeah, so it's just like this is where we're seeing like young CGI. This is probably start the trend of do all that sort of stuff.
The de-aging. I mean, we'd had CGI for years, but this was one of the first times I saw people obviously and deliberately made to look younger. I mean, I don't know what little nips and tucks get done for actors' vanity, but this was the first time where we were like, this is Patrick Stewart, and we're basing this on how he looked in the first series of Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was their guide. But their faces look really rigid. Really rigid. They look like they've sort of.
I think it's when they smile. I think.
Yeah, but I like the idea because the film.
Yeah, it does look a bit creepy though.
Well, I don't know if they've used a different film stock, but it looks a bit grainier somehow, and obviously they've got all the fashion and cars older. And there's something about this I kind of like. And of course you've got Xavier, and we're always like, how were they friends? And it's like, well, you actually see back when they were friends.
Yeah, that's when we go back to the days of, when they were a lot younger. Obviously, you kind of learn how they got together and how they came to know each other and that sort of thing. But yeah, I just kind of think they look very strange. Just like look at their faces.
Yeah, they're sort of like this is when they were friends, but they're still almost like at odds, or almost like rivals, weren't they? Or like it's like, oh, you're still trying to change me, Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we've got where it's going to go, but they're visiting a young girl called Jean, and obviously we work out immediately this is Jean Grey as a child, when Famke Janssen was about 22, but there you go, she never ages. Famke Janssen, I'm sure, was born in like 1964 or something, so she would have been in her 20s by now, but she just doesn't age. And I don't know if they've been called there by the parents or what, but they're there to meet this sort of very special mutant. And this kid can read minds, and she can levitate the cars outside. Shocking Stan Lee. And then he offers her the chance
just
to
trying to water his garden, god damn it.
Yeah. Well, if he was having a piss, it would have gone flowing right in his face, wouldn't it?
That would have been embarrassing, wouldn't it?
I know. Excelsior. So she's offered she's more or less offered a place at the school, isn't she? And then we cut forward 10 years, so we're now in 1996, and we've got a boy of I don't know, 12, 13, and he's sort of shut. He's in a luxury sort of high rise. I don't know if it's an office or their home or what, I don't know, but he's in the bathroom trying to cut off what we find out are like wings, but they're white wings like you see on a dove or something. And he's crying his eyes out, and his son, he walks in, this Warren Worthington, and says, "Oh no, not you." We don't know at this point, but he's either a businessman or a politician or both at this stage. We don't know. And then we cut forward to the danger room, and again, I just think, skipping forward a bit quick, really, but okay.
So it kind of starts off on this kind of like false pretense type sort of thing, where it's like, oh no, everything's all escalated to this sort of like level where, like, the major cities comes like battlegrounds, and you've got like what you call them, those big machines, I forgot what they call them.
Sentinels.
In the
Sentinels,
yeah. Well, these Sentinels hunt them down, and it turns out to be all like holodeck or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew going in, because the Sentinels were a bit of an Easter egg for fans of the comic books. Now, the Sentinels appear in later films, so we're now familiar with them, but at the time, I don't know, it turned out to be something from some simulation, as it turned out. We didn't know what they were fighting. I had no context, didn't know what it was. But I knew this was a simulation, so I wonder... I don't think I'd read a synopsis when I went in, but I just wonder if I'd read it in some review. Like, maybe a review said something along the lines of eagle-eyed fans will also spot the first appearance of the Sentinels, although it turns out just to be a training exercise or something like that. So I knew this was a simulation, so... And on rewatch, I always get a bit frustrated with it, because I know it's not actually anything. So it's like, just get this bit done so we can get the story started.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you kind of see it coming a mile off, really, don't you? Because it just sort of like, it comes from fucking nowhere. You just sort of like, hang on. Yeah.
And we're starting to see Kitty Pryde and Iceman have some sort of chemistry. Because he wants some, damn it.
Oh yeah, again. This doesn't make him just a bit of a fucking dick, though. I mean, the film kind of like, the film tries to be nice to him because it kind of cuts around, but there is like stuff where he actually kisses her, and then like sort of.
If I didn't know better, and I do know better because this film was rushed, and apparently Brett Ratner kind of butted out of most of the writing. But this seems like a Brett Ratner sensibility, that he would genuinely think, well, it's perfectly reasonable. He can't get any there, so he's got to get some somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, that is quite a cold and callous way to look at it. Although you would understand that when he can't be physically close with the person he does want to be with, that might be frustrating. But I think to play it out this way strikes me as very Brett Ratner. But how much, if anything, he had to do with pushing it that way, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a scene later on, so that's probably a bit more like, oh, for fuck's sake, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that if you weren't like thinking about it. You know what I mean?
The one thing I will say about this film is I do remember from first watching, some of the mechanics of sort of setup and payoff are a bit more obvious here. So Wolverine gets Colossus to throw him straight at the robot, and I thought, right, it's the first modern day scene of the film, so they're setting up something to happen at the end, which is exactly the case. And it switches off. It's like Yeah, it is. It is like the holodeck on Star Trek or something, basically, that they're in. It does refer to it as the near future, so I don't know. When it says 20 years ago, I don't know if it means 20 years ago from the near future or 20 years ago from now, so God knows. But we won't worry about that too much.
Yeah, so you just sit back and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and that goes for you too, listeners. And we've got, like, Scott.
Yeah, so Scott's basically, so Wolverine's kind of like, you kind of get the impression that Wolverine's just there, like, helping out as Scott's kind of...
Cry wanking on his own.
Yeah, feeling sorry for himself.
Yeah.
And he does his whole, Wolverine does his whole, like, hey, it's all right, I feel the same pain too, and like that, which
isn't helpful. I'm sorry.
No.
If my living lover, wife, partner, whatever it might be, dies, and some man who was interested in her said, "Yeah, I'm just in as much pain as you," that's not helpful. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, you'd be the last person you want to see it.
Oh, great. So you're all like fantasizing about her and remembering her too. Brilliant, thanks.
Which at this point, as an audience, isn't being fucking earned.
No,
because,
I know.
So the previous films, you haven't.
Well, I think when I was kind to it last week, it's just I think it's almost it's a projection of where the series would have gone if it had stayed cohesive. In that, like, I'm sure a Bryan Singer entry would have been built on it a little bit more over time. How many entries that would have been, I don't know. But yeah, you're right. They have a little bit of an attraction and chemistry. That's really all. It's a bit like if you were happily married, would never consider cheating in your life, but you have a bit of playful banter with a woman somewhere. That it was like very little more than that.
Yeah, because at no point did I honestly think in any of the films that Jean was so tempted by him.
No, I think she kind of, and I mean this in no disrespectful way to the character, but I think there was a bit of her that kind of liked the attention, but not in a prick teasing way. Just in a, this is like.
It's just like meeting someone.
It's a fun little way to spend the time.
Yeah, but. Sorry, I'm spoken for. Nothing's going to change that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But there you go. So, and we start to get the real beginnings of the problems with continuity in this series now. Obviously, Hank McCoy is somebody different than we saw briefly on a TV set in an earlier film, but it will come up with Bolivar Trask in a bit as well. Bolivar Trask is a sort of aging black guy in this film, and he's Peter Dinklage later on. So there you go.
Different timeline, you could say, but
yeah. So we have like Rogue can't touch Scott. Scott sort of freezes his lips and tries to kiss her, but it's not safe, basically.
I mean Bobby.
What did I say?
Scott.
Oh, Bobby, Iceman. And Scott ends up sort of disappearing to go presumably to Alkali Lake. And, well, we say presumably, we know that, but it's presumably at this point because we don't actually know where he's heading. And then we cut to Kelsey Grammer. And I really love his makeup just because it still looks like Kelsey Grammer. He's able to act through the makeup reasonably well.
Yeah.
And I like Kelsey Grammer anyway.
Yeah,
that's why he's still good. That's why he's so good, because he's someone like Vinnie Jones. He doesn't disappear into his juggernaut outfit, whereas Kelsey Grammer does. He becomes Beast. He's not Fraser. He's not Sideshow Bob.
You've got him and Patrick Stewart in the same cast, and they've both got like fantastic voices.
Yeah.
I mean, throw in Roger.
Sounds great. All three of them.
Throw in Roger Moore, and I'd be a fucking tripod.
We'd be there. How many suave, stylish, smooth voices can you cram into one film? We've got Ian McKellen, Kelsey Grammer, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
They could read the phone book between them, and we'd be all enthralled.
I'd be hard, let's be honest. So, what are we talking about? He's like he's in the cabinet. The presidential cabinet, that is, not actually in a cabinet.
Not in a
cabinet.
How did I get into this cabinet? This is
And,
this is
how
crazy.
did I get this nutshell? This is silly.
yeah, it just reminds me of the Tom Cruise episode of South Park. But there you go. Running away from his gay thoughts.
That's funny.
So they're trying to track Magneto, but they've captured Mystique. And we see it. They've got a live link to her being interrogated. Now, could it signpost any clearer something's about to go wrong? They're not just going to sit there and watch some like procedural questions and go, very interesting, are they? So
you've got like asking the questions as well. It's that bloke from Silence of the Lambs. What's his name?
He doesn't ask her about any farmyard meats, to be honest. Lambs, pork, nothing. Doesn't even ask pork.
I'm going to look him up. If you want sort of like a creepy interrogator, he's a little bit pervy with it. Then
well, she's just winding him up until like he leaves himself open, and she basically headbutts him, and she does get subdued. But even so, it just shows you she's still dangerous. I prefer this take on Mystique, and that isn't just about how attractive her and Jennifer Lawrence are or aren't relative to each other. This version's got a menace that the other version never had, and was never really designed to have either.
Its menace, and also is just also like she's actually dangerous. She's actually really competent, of getting in and out of places and fighting and things like that.
She's very calm through it all, but there's a slight playfulness to her as well, but it's quite a malevolent playfulness. So I just kind of like this take. So they're just talking about Magneto and all the rest of it, and Beast is then shown what she was trying to do when she was captured, and it was about stealing a cure. And it's been synthesized from a young creature, well, not a young boy, known as Leech. If you look up the character of Leech from the comic books, it's very, very different. Much more animalistic. But he's basically... He looks like a cancer victim or something, doesn't he, when we see this boy? He looks like a cancer patient.
Because he's bald.
Because he's bald, yeah. And very pale and stuff like that. But they think they are able to suppress the gene that is the mutant gene, and they are desperate to have Beast involved because they said, look, we need you if we're going to sort of sell this cure. And then I think we cut to Xavier giving one of his lectures to the students, and they're talking about, again, it annoys me when films do this, because when a film does it right, you get something like Back to the Future, which is all set up and pay off, but here I can see it every time. The problem is, just to go take a step back, I knew from the trailers Xavier was going to die, because you have them all looking sad and his wheelchair empty. It's in the trailer. It's just a really bad decision. And he's looking at a supposedly brain-dead patient of Moira McTaggart, who we'll see with Rose Byrne later in the series. It's Olivia Williams from The Sixth Sense here. And he's saying, what about if we could transfer human consciousness into this body? And I know he's about to die, so the post-credit sequence is no surprise to me at all.
No, there's a scene he sort of looks at the camera and smiles a little bit kind of later on during that big battle. Yeah. And then obviously, we see the scene at the end where he goes like, hello, Moira, and it's just like, what? Not a surprise, but still, I think it is a nod, for the fans, so...
Yeah, so Storm is out on the terrace, really troubled, hence the weather goes all dark. It's like she's done it on purpose.
Plus also, he also mentions to Storm, about replacement.
Yeah.
Which instantly makes you think, alright, so...
Okay, so you've got about 2 scenes left.
So at some point in this film, you're going to buy it. Okay, right.
Yeah. So they're just talking about the situation, and that the president's pretty kind to us, but we shouldn't be in hiding, but we're just staying wary and all that kind of thing. And then do you want to sort of run this place one day? And they talk about what do they do then? I think Beast comes to visit them, and this is just to tell them about the cure. and to patronise Wolverine, which is funny because we find out in a couple of films' time Wolverine's about 170 years old, and he's calling him boy. But there you go. So, in the running time, this is where the film's trying to do good work, but it's a really short running time, and they'll stand around having a bit of moral hand-wringing about the rights and wrongs of this cure, and it's almost like this film doesn't really have time.
It rushes through it all.
Yeah, well, because the moment he's told about it, we're straight to Alcatraz, where Warren Worthington, who we saw in the opening scenes of the film, the father of Angel, is telling them about it, and he says, "Oh no, they're people, and it's it's a choice, but it is a disease, and we can cure it now." Rogue immediately responds in a way that you go, right, well, she's taking it, isn't she? And I think that's the biggest problem with this film. It's predictable at every turn.
And you have Storm, who is adamant against it, saying no, there's nothing wrong with us.
Which is showing some kind of leadership.
Beast is a bit more sympathetic.
Well, he makes a gag about shedding on the sofa. What he's saying is that his mutation is not invisible. Some of theirs is.
Yeah. I mean, but it also depends, because each mutation is different. I mean, if you got something like, say, Wolverine's, you won't be that bothered by it, because in many ways, that's actually kind of useful. But if you like someone like Rogue,
can't touch anybody.
You can touch it.
Yeah.
Or you got something that's just a bit shit, and it's a bit like,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You think I'd rather just not have it.
What, my anus grows mushrooms, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Very, very useful.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Can you imagine that in a battle scene at the end? Just drop your trousers and throw some mushrooms.
Use your mushrooms.
Yeah. So then we cut to the sort of Brotherhood side of things, and it's like a group of mutants having a meeting to discuss this. And we see another boy. We see the fat guy who can become thin.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of interesting powers here, don't we?
But why, if he can be either? All right, I'm not looking to fat shame. Put it this way: I've spent most of my life overweight, but if I could choose a form, it probably wouldn't be that. But it's just that I don't know what use that is.
Well, to be honest, you choose whichever one was preferable at the time, wouldn't you? So if you were bigger and taller, and you're at a gig, you'd be like, all right, I'll be big and tall.
Yeah.
But if I want to sort of slim down and look great, then
I suppose if you're on a bus and you don't want someone to sit next to you, it would help to be a few pounds heavier, wouldn't it? Spill over the next seat. All right, fair enough. So this is effectively the Brotherhood sort of recruiting, isn't it?
Yes. So Magneto's there at the back, and he makes a point of well, they say that it's voluntary, but really, they never say they're going to exterminate you. They just do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So he picks up Callisto there. That's the one who can move really fast, and she knows what mutants are around her.
She's really cool.
And you got Spiky Boy.
Spiky Boy, poisonous spikes.
I mean, are they? I mean, that's fair. That is a bit of a shit power as well, isn't it? It's like, that's great.
Yeah, poisonous spines.
I can kill you when I hug you. I choose to hug you.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't hug anybody. It must be really horrible. You can't come close to anybody.
Well, no, you probably can, but
you can. But you can choose when to
spike you just like them. Just choose people that you don't like.
But what you don't want to do is lose control when you're excited.
No, this is it. He goes, oh bloody hell, sorry.
And suddenly you unleash a completely different kind of prick.
I did it again.
All right, let's move on from this. He picks up a couple of people, and they basically catch up with the armored cop. So she can sense where mutants are. This Callisto, so she can locate.
Instantly straight to Mystique, who's basically travelled by.
How we've made that, I don't know, because she's in a room and she says, "I can sense all the mutants in here." So that implies around you. It doesn't imply there's 4 states away. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, she hasn't got Cerebro.
I know, that's
no. She is Cerebro.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a police convoy carrying some mutants, including Mystique, who's again sort of shit talking the guards and pretending to be a scared little girl, and then and so on. And you got the guards don't help themselves in these kind of films because they always either beat them up or spray them with something or whatever. She promises to kill them, and then what?
Don't we go somewhere after this?
We don't see the breakout immediately, do we?
No.
I think the next scene is Beast going to Alcatraz, and we see Leech, and this was in the trailer as well. He reaches his hand out, and it goes to Kelsey Grammer's normal hand, and he's just like he plays that scene really well because you can see he doesn't know what to make of this.
It's also like a little bit like, oh, that's my human hand kind of thing. It's like I've not seen that in. Well, we don't know, do we? But,
I think. Well, we'll get hints of it in First Class, which is a very different take on Beast, but it is something that sort of comes on with, I think, puberty or something. Because it was Nicholas Hoult. It was a few years after that, but yeah. Okay, so Leech's power is basically he will take away your mutation when you're close to him, and they've used his sort of blood and DNA to synthesize this cure. And then we go to the end for Scott Summers, which is further into the film than I thought it was. This was. I think what I would say is nearly every poor review of this film picks this up as almost Exhibit A. That they really, really, even more than Singer, shat on Cyclops here. But then he was in Superman Returns, so I don't know if this was almost like a cameo for him.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it was conflict scheduling. So, like Mystique, Becca Remain, she only had like a limited time, so that's why she isn't in the film.
Austin had a photo shoot, did he? She had to go and do.
Yeah, groovy maybe.
And
on years prior.
Yeah. Okay. So, the scene's quite nicely done in its way. The area's got something about it, hasn't it? Floating rocks and all the rest of it. But it turns out, he's hearing her voice, and then she kind of appears to him. From a whirlpool.
It's all kind of done in quite a mystical way, isn't it? I mean, it's the same with James Marsden because he was also in the Superman film, wasn't he? The other Superman movie. So obviously he's kind of, because I think in the comics he plays like a sort of a mate. He's a bigger role in the comics as I understand it. But like in this film, Cyclops is only in it for like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something like that.
That's probably his total screen time. It's probably less than that. It's probably less than a minute with Wolverine at the start of the film.
Yeah, and that's it.
And
that's your lot.
It's probably under 2 minutes here. Probably.
That's your lot for Scott.
But yeah, she starts kissing him, and it's almost a bit like Rogue, isn't it? So he's almost like being killed by this. And then it cuts away from that. He's in agony, and you see her eyes sort of flash, and her skin go kind of veiny and odd. It's almost like a little bit of light. She
goes dark.
Yeah. She doesn't go Phoenix-y, though. But anyway.
No, it doesn't go quite that bad.
So, yeah, Scott is killed. We don't find that till later on when sort of Wolverine goes there and stuff.
A lot of big losses in this film.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, so Xavier feels this happen and tells Storm and Wolverine to go to Alkali Lake immediately. And that's where they find, like, rocks and stuff levitating. And they see Cyclops' glasses just floating. Jean is there, but she's unconscious. So we don't know what's happened, but Scott has presumably been killed.
What happened to Scott, but never officially answered, and we're just like, yeah, he's dead, isn't he?
He was in the shower. Yeah, so I saw.
Yes.
What was it I was reviewing the other day?
I had a really awful dream where I lost control of my powers, and I was like a grade 5, and I just couldn't control myself, and everything got destroyed.
That made me laugh when they did that in Dallas, because they they had like new people come into the cast for the whole previous year and stuff like that. Oh, it was Fast 9 I said that about. I said we are one step away from Bobby Ewing was in the shower all along. Because like his brother who's never been mentioned turns up, and like Han is alive, and
that's a meme I saw today, I think, also on Facebook somewhere. And it's like like Fast franchise. There's nothing more important than family. And film 9. Oh, by the way, I've got a brother.
We used to get that in Neighbours as well. Like you'd either get somebody die and then they want to come back, and the only thing they can think to do is a twin or something, or amnesia. The other thing you used to get in Neighbours, I remember, is someone would a new member of the cast would knock on one of their doors and say, "Hi, I'm Marco," or whatever, and they'd go, "Come on in," and that's it. Could be fucking anybody.
No, it's when say one of the the Kennedys, the sort of the son leaves, and you never see or hear from them again, even though the parents are still there.
Yeah.
You think you think your son never fucking visits you.
I know, and then they have weddings and. Even NYPD Blue had that. It's like, oh, he can't make it back for the wedding. Why? The actor fucked off and had a row with them last year, you know? There you go. So, I'm presuming from there we go back to the prison convoy.
Which is a decent sequence, really. Because I always appreciate a little bit of Magneto just ripping loose.
Well, we're intercutting 2 or 3 different things here. Xavier has to tell everybody what happened with Jean. She was the only class 5 mutant. That doesn't mean a fucking thing. Although Callisto said to
just means more powers.
There's not one in this room over a 3. Yeah, but is it like grading? Is it like, when you do martial arts or something? Do you have to do a grading? I don't know. But he said
it's how it measures on the Richter scale.
She had a what? Oh no. That's Rickman, isn't it? I was thinking the Alan Richter scale. Yes. This is odd, but he's explaining that she had sort of a dual personality. That the sort of the other personality we came to know as the Phoenix. It's incredibly powerful. I put psychic barriers in place, and they're clearly breaking down, and that's what was happening in the second film. He gets a bit defensive over it all. The other thing you've got is talk about the cure sort of on the news. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Cures for it. You've got Ben Foster being brought in as a sort of adult angel wanting... he wants to give him the cure to give him a better life, which again, in the hands of a better filmmaker, would be terrific, because it does bring up those sort of... There are moral dilemmas in this, because he's not evil. He just wants the best for his son. But then, of course, when he flies away, kind of his wings are kind of beautiful. So is there beauty in being a mutant? So you can see what they're going for. And it
doesn't quite work when you think about it, because it's like, right, well...
Well, we get no time with it, that's why. We get no time with it.
You're son of a millionaire, and what your mutant power is, you have wings. Well, I think when we're heading into more acceptable society towards mutants. Do you know what I mean? You sort of feel like the fire. I mean, I get,
It's just rushed because all right, yeah, he was. The problem is you went 10 years ahead from the young Jean Grey, and that's now at least 10 years ago, depending on how you read that. So 10 years ago, he was upset. Presumably those wings had only just come along, maybe a puberty thing, because as I say, the kid was probably about 13. But we don't know what's happened in the years in between. A lot of people are awkward when they're 13, but not awkward when they're 23. The attitude towards mutants is different, just as the attitude towards gay people is different now than it was 30 or 40 years ago. So it isn't sold. It's brought in, he's happy to have it done, and then he panics and doesn't want it done and flies off. And it's like, you've wasted a good idea there. And it's not the last time they're going to waste this character, because we do see him later in Apocalypse, I think, and he's even more wasted there, because he gets less screen time for less. He gets more screen time for less effect.
Yes, but his wings are metal.
Brilliant. So, yeah, the breakout now. Magneto just uses his powers to basically break the vehicles and flip them and everything else and crush things and break into the cab, and you've got in there sort of the multiple man who can rob 7 banks at the same time.
Johnny Knoxville.
Not Johnny Knoxville.
He does look a little bit like Knoxville.
A little bit. The hair's very similar.
Budget Johnny Knoxville.
Budget Johnny Knoxville, yeah. Most expensive film ever made. Budget Johnny Knoxville.
Budget Johnny.
And you've got Mystique in there.
Expect to talk. Budget Johnny Knoxville.
And you've got the Juggernaut, who we're told straight away, because they're literally reading the patient notes, and it's like once he picks up momentum, you can't stop him.
What's the guest list?
Yeah, literally.
It's like
once he pops, he can't stop.
Very, very lazy. I mean, you could take one look at him. He looks a bit like Ram Man from He-Man.
He is essentially Ram Man, isn't he? There's a new series coming on Netflix.
Yeah, no, I've seen the trailer for it.
Can't wait. It looks amazing.
We'll see what it comes out like, because objectively, as an adult, I don't imagine I really enjoy the original He-Man now, but I loved it as a kid.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's done. Kevin Smith's been the sort of showrunner on it.
Yeah. So hopefully it should be good. Fingers crossed.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, sorry.
So one of the guards happens to have the cure on him, which is basically in a sort of plastic gun with darts in it. Handy, it's plastic.
Yeah.
He steps to. He goes to fire at Magneto. Mystique spots it and jumps in front of him, and immediately starts to convulse, and her body just loses the mutation, and she just becomes Rebecca Romijn, but with dark hair. And Magneto immediately says, "You're no longer one of us."
Quite a lot like Charlize Theron with dark hair as well.
Definitely, yeah. Aeon Flux kind of era, yeah. He says, yeah, she used to be so beautiful. There's something about this. I know he doesn't like humans, but again, all adds to how rushed is this. He just absolutely destroyed a convoy to get to her. And the moment this happens, he's like, bye then.
Yeah.
We know why, because he's got no time for humans, but it doesn't play right to me.
Yeah, you'd like a bit more time in the scene to kind of like get a little bit of mourning, and then like have the impact of the coldness of like, sorry, you're not one of us kind of thing.
Even just a moment for him to get himself together with after the shock would be something, but he's immediately like, oh well. Yeah, okay. Again, in a better film, a lot of the president talking about the concern that this cure is going to just make things even worse, but for mutant-human relations would be great, but it's not. And then what? Wolverine's watching Jean and she wakes up. This is creepy. He just stands watching her while she sleeps and not wearing a huge amount.
To be fair, the scene did great with me a little bit. I whizzed through it. I was like, this is a bit creepy, so I just fast-forwarded it.
Well,
it made me super uncomfortable.
She immediately comes onto him, and it's like, is that the Phoenix? Is that Jean? Is the Phoenix a sexual being? Because we never see that again. In fact, later in the film, it's the Jean version of the character that responds to him, not the other one. So I'm well confused. She starts slashing his skin, which obviously heals immediately. And then, like, the Phoenix is basically trying to... So is it just emotions, the Phoenix? We don't really know. So Wolverine then sort of says, where's Cyclops? And then Jean comes round and looks a bit confused, and then she goes crazy, 8 bonkers with her drilling sex, and basically wrecks the lab.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a young one's reference, folks. Bambi
and
2.
Buggers off.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's just like, well, that was a nothing scene as well. She does say something about asking him to kill her. And then, well, it's like, well,
Is that in the last scene?
No, it's she mentions it here. But then the Phoenix sort of takes control again. It's a Gollum Smeagol thing, really, but it's just, it's signposted again. It's like, okay, so he kills her at the end of the film. Right, fair enough. It is like The Man with the Golden Gun times about 8, because there's about 8... in The Man with the Golden Gun, you see, like, the waxwork Roger Moore at the start, and you go, well, he's just going to stand in for that then, isn't he? Which means the last scene of the film is on this island. Fair enough, as long as I know what's going to happen all the way through. And I picked that up at 8. Honestly, at 8 years old, I watched it and went, well, Roger can just, James Bond can just stand there, can't he? This film does it about 8 times. This tells us that Wolverine is going to kill her at the end of the film. But anyway, so she destroys the lab. And then what? She kind of she leaves and she blocks out Charles.
Mm.
And then I think they go to her old house, and I'm not really sure why. Did they think she'd go there? I mean, she is there, but I don't know what made them think. If I went missing, you don't need to head to where I lived when I was 7. I don't think that would be where I'd go.
I don't know. I think reasons, like some sort of like emotional kind of like.
Oh,
no,
reasons. Sorry, Chris, I hadn't thought of that. Reasons. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's sort that out.
Yes. So.
So she levitates all the furniture. Let's get through this. She levitates all the furniture and explodes Charles. Not in the fun, let's get excited way.
Yeah.
Exploding, eh?
Yeah.
It exploded with delight.
Oh, yeah, she's lifting the house and everything. So they tried to stop it all, but that's it, really.
Yeah, it's got kind of a bit of a recap of the opening scene where, but obviously things escalate more. So, yeah, Magneto leaves with Jean or Phoenix.
Yeah, because she could be useful if he needs someone to stand around later.
Yes.
I mean, honestly,
he's looking to use her as a weapon, essentially.
I mean, it's called The Last Stand. It isn't called Dark Phoenix, but it could have been because it's that storyline, or it's their attempt, their version.
That's what I was thinking when we come to Dark Phoenix. I don't think I saw it, unfortunately, when it came out. And then I was sort of reading all the blurb and everything, and kind of thought, have we not already seen this film?
I think the point I'm about to make is the Dark Phoenix is at least somewhat about Dark Phoenix, right? Whereas, I mean, there's a lot wrong with that film. It got delayed many times, and I probably slightly overrated it on the basis that I went in with such low expectations, and it wasn't anywhere near as bad as I was fearing. This is called The Last Stand, so you could at least argue it's not signposting that it's just about Jean. But they were building to this storyline in the last film. They've then let it out in this film very early. She's the central one of the 2 central plots of the film. And they do very, very little with her, and it does remind me of Olivia Munn in Apocalypse. They just have her standing around looking sort of vaguely cool. We get like a funeral or a memorial service. The headstone's already been done, obviously, because that's how funerals work. And I really don't like funeral scenes in films. I don't know about you guys, but I just find them really like melodramatic. They're like.
I think it's quite sad.
It's like something out of daytime
especially you've got sort of major characters as well, like we have here. So it's always a bit like, oh. So.
I'm not a big fan of them, but they're dead, and within moments we're going to be in the sort of final act of the film, really.
It's so cliche at this point.
Right? I think funerals in films are cliched anyway. It's like, well, you've had 2.5 films, if you like, to develop this character. We know him. We also, most of us, carry a little bit of baggage for him anyway because we've known him from Star Trek and other things. So whatever feelings we have about what's just happened, we have. And I just think funerals at this point, done this way in these types of films, is a way to sort of signpost to the audience, this is how you're supposed to feel and this is how we feel. And it's like, well, we know all that. You're just layering on melodrama. It's like when... Is
it an excuse for Halle Berry to get in front and cite the Federation Code?
The Oath.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, the Oath.
Yeah. I mean, these memorials are normally cheesy. Anytime they give speeches in these kind of films, there are normally a whole lot of nothing. I mean, even in Rocky IV, Apollo dies, and then we got to watch his funeral, and Rocky give a speech, and I just find it pure cheese. I've never really liked it, but anyway, the point is we are pretty much getting to the final act of the film almost straight away. I mean, we have a little interlude where we see, we see Moira McTaggart here as well, but again, bit of a waste of Olivia Williams, although she is uncredited. We've also got this ice skating scene. Is this the scene you were referring to?
Yeah, so obviously everyone's upset at Xavier Heights, of course.
Yeah. And Bobby thinks, I can get me some.
Well, that's just the thing, like, on paper you kind of read it as like, yeah, fair enough, like, I'm sure everyone's like sort of pally, it's like obviously he's in a relationship with Rogue, and you're gonna be friends, and you see your friend upset, you want to sort of do something to cheer him up, but there's just like, you don't fucking take it ice skating, and you don't. Do you know what I mean? There's kind of like, there's different ways you can show support. There's just, it's just like, no. Actually, I watched the deleted stuff, so after watching this, so but it kind of like filled me in on a few things where they did actually like kiss after that.
That's a very wise cut, because Rogue's already conflicted. It's not a really dumb film like that second Jurassic World film or Batman and Robin or any countless others we've talked about. It's not super dumb, but its IQ points are definitely like a few points lower, in that it's having to signpost everything to us. And if you've got half a brain, you look at it and go, I know what you're signposting here. Had they put that kiss scene in, it's like, I would have known without even seeing that Rogue saw it, because we're trying to prompt Rogue to go and get the cure. But Rogue is also, she's already conflicted. We know Rogue wants the cure.
It kind of makes bad on Rogue though, because at the end, if she goes back and she's there for him, oh, I'm cured. It kind of goes back on like what this kind of said. It's like, don't do it for some boy.
But it's also inadvertently incredibly sexist.
But she is actually doing it. Then she's actually doing it for the boy. Then,
because
do you know what I mean?
The thing is, we've established in the first film she wanted to be physical with a boy, only kissing, but she wanted a physical contact with a boy. In the second film, she kind of wanted Bobby, and in this film, she still wants Bobby. And then the film says, "Here's this cure," and we see her look at it and go, "I could live normally there." Now, if she'd gone and done it then, put in its basest way, and I don't mean this as base as it's going to sound, she wants sex, she wants physical intimacy, so she goes to get the cure. Doing it this way, she's being driven because he wants sex. And I just think that's like really fucking dumb, and only someone as brain dead as Brett Ratner, or tone deaf more than brain dead, as Brett Ratner wouldn't pick that up and just go. I don't think it's a strong and intentional message the film is making, but again, it's just the sensibility of a filmmaker is like, well, he wants to bang. What's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but she shouldn't be rearranging her life to facilitate it.
Because it's in the very next scene, you have her leaving, and she has the bit with Wolverine, where Wolverine basically sort of tells her straight, and he's like, look, don't do it just because it's some boy. Do it because you want it. In other words, it's like, do it because you want to be able to like touch people and have
but
normal relationships.
But she's already on her way out the door. It's too late. She's already doing it.
Even if it doesn't work out, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but at least that interaction is there, and he says the right thing to her.
It's not quite as bad as we're making it sound, because if you just let the film wash over you, it may not occur. You may just think, well, like, Bobby's frustrated, she's frustrated, it's a horrible situation. He's actually only being nice to that girl. He's not kissed her in the final cut of the film or anything. So what? But if you sit and think about it for a minute, it's just
like, yeah. If you try and place yourself in Bobby's shoes, you wouldn't be doing that.
No, you wouldn't,
because you wouldn't be doing that in any normal relationship anyway. And B, given the relationship with Rogue, you'd probably be a bit more considerate, as in like sort of going around.
You've chosen to be in a relationship with someone who can't touch you. You are aware that this is a problem. You can't suddenly go, no, well, I'm not getting any. It's like, well, that was kind of the deal, sadly. I mean, the only thing they could have done worse is have Bobby try to convince her to get it, the vaccine, not him. So I don't know. It's just a thing where you think you've got a bit of a tone deaf director here anyway. He probably didn't write this, but he's certainly not like He's not switched on about like relationships enough to pick that up. And I just think that again, it's just a bit rushed. With a few more scenes for it to breathe, because again, she's disappearing the very scene after she's seen this. I think if it had been 3 scenes later, you might just buy, well, she's had a few days to think about it, reflect on it and stuff. Whereas she's immediately seen her guy with someone else and gone, right, I'm getting the cure. And it's just like rushed. But we are getting to the final sort of act now, really. Magneto's sort of put together an army in the woods.
Yeah, we have Magneto's. Yeah, we have Bobby goes to look for her, and then he meets Pyro. He kind of does like a attack on the vaccine center, which is part of Magneto's plan to sort of start attacking.
Yeah. That's what it is. I mean, the boy who is the cure is at Alcatraz. Now, Alcatraz is on like an island in the Bay of San Francisco, basically. So that's going to be the end sort of point of this film. He's going to go and try and get that boy and, kill him so that they can't synthesize any cure and destroy what cure has been made. That's the point. And meanwhile, Jean is going to sort of offer them protection by standing there with virtually limitless power, but most of the time she does just stand there. There are a couple of points, like she disintegrates a load of like soldiers at one point, but that's about it. And it just becomes like a big mutant fight, doesn't it? You get the bit with the good guys sort of camping out with them, and Mystique coming onto Wolverine as anything from herself to Jean to him to whatever. And
yeah, because Mystique kind of rats him out after betraying him. Hell off for you, score. So it goes straight to that into like the attack, because you have multiple man kind of set up as a decoy, and then there you are. You go straight into the final battle scene, and so there's not much we want to say about this really. It's just mutants fighting mutants. I
don't really want to say too much about it at all. I think he's lifting the Golden Gate Bridge. That's one thing, and then the rest of it is like, if Iceman was going to fight another mutant, which would it be? Pyro, obviously. Well, they were shit talking each other in the last film, but it's just obvious, fire and ice. And I showed this to someone for the first time, and they actually just went, bit cliche, didn't it? And they're not even British. I didn't even know they knew the word cliched. It's like they are just aware of film cliché so intently. I don't want to say much about this really. They're trying to protect the boy, so Kitty Pryde, who can walk through walls, is trying to protect him from the Juggernaut, who they eventually sort of knock out. You get the "I'm the Juggernaut bitch" line, which is awful.
It's like the worst / funniest line in the film. Don't you know who I am? I'm a Juggernaut bitch.
You got Magneto, who ends up getting the cure, so to speak, which again is perfect for his arc. It's like, that's really sad.
He's distracted while I think Beast leaps in and sort of stabs him in
Magneto
the chest.
charges in and he's like, you never learn.
Yeah, Wolverine goes over, and Wolverine knows that obviously this guy can move metal, so he's just going to like toy with you for a minute, and while he's distracted, Beast just gallops in and stabs him with the cure.
Yeah.
So he now has no powers for the time being, at least. Anyway, and then what? Oh, you've just got Jean. She's basically fighting off everyone single-handed, and Wolverine realizes with his healing power, he's the only one who's going to get close to her.
Angel saves his dad. That's the other thing that just randomly comes straight out of nowhere.
Randomly comes out of nowhere. Again, in a better film it would work, because his dad's not a bad man, and the film sort of needs to tell you that. The fact that the father was trying to, in an X2 quality film, it would be very understandable that there are shades of grey in all of this and nuance, and the fact he wanted his son to take a cure, he genuinely thought it was for his son's benefit. He's been conditioned to think of it as a disease. Well, it is an affliction. Sometimes it's a good affliction, sometimes it's a bad one. So the idea that he saves his dad is good, but again, it's random. We only see this guy 2 or 3 times, and Angel's wasted in the film anyway. It's meant to be like the flip side of Rogue. Rogue wants it, this kid. Rogue grows up okay, and as she gets older, she realises this is a curse on her Angel is kind of the opposite. He believes it's a curse and grows to sort of accept it, and probably feels quite free flying and stuff like that. But yeah, it effectively, you've got Wolverine can get closer to her. I mean, he's being stripped down to adamantium over and over again and regenerating, and she becomes herself for a minute and says, "Save me," and he says, "I love you," and stabs her. And it's like, I love you. Do you know, I haven't been that jarred. There's been twice in the Bond series when that happened. One was Spectre, when they say they love each other, and it's like, hang on a minute, I thought you were just fucking. And then and the end of Tomorrow Never Dies, because Wei Lin and Bond had zero chemistry. When he kisses her at the end, I'm like, whoa, hang on. Even though every Bond film felt finished like that in that era, I'm still genuinely like, whoa, hang on, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's something about that just doesn't strike, couple, is there? It's just like, no, it's kind of, you just like, platonic, ally, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's the same in this. I love you. Well, I thought you could just kind of felt a bit of chemistry with her. I mean, that was there. We can't deny that.
It's just a bit of workplace flirting, really. That's all.
Exactly. I mean, you get chemistry with all sorts of people in your life, but it doesn't mean that. It really doesn't. Do you know what I mean? It just means like, oh, I really like seeing them around, and like, yeah, we have a playfulness. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it would be almost like Bond just coming out and telling like Moneypenny, "I love you." It was like, whoa, hang on. Hang
on a minute. I was only handing you plane tickets. Fucking hell. Yeah. Yeah. I wish that hat stand was. I wish that hat stand was you, and this hat was my cock. Or something. Yes.
So, so now we're wrapping things up. Now we have another 2 funerals.
Yeah.
Jean and Scott.
Yeah.
The school opens up.
Being run by a storm.
Yeah. Hank is now like he's now
ambassador.
Ambassador. Yeah, that's what. For men and mutant kind of like.
Yeah, Leech is a student at the school. I don't know if anyone's brave enough to sit next to him.
All it means is just lose their powers for a bit. Well,
it's like, yeah, I guess. Angel's sort of flying over the Golden Gate Bridge, and they're rebuilding it, and it pans down to a park where you've got Eric just sort of playing chess, and they're all metal pieces, and one of the pieces wobbles.
And I love the idea of leaving Eric just as like a lonely old man sitting at a chessboard.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish he was just see him just trying to move it, and it just ends before, or just ends like kind of abruptly, just kind of before you think you see something.
It's a bit of a kind of Inception moment.
I was just thinking of exactly that.
Before, isn't it?
It's the spinning top from Inception.
It is.
Because I think for that, I'd rather leave that as much as a question mark and kind of really unanswered.
It just says there'll be more films. I mean,
leave you anticipating it, but then
after the credits, you've got Moira McTaggart in the hospital room, and then you hear "Hello, Moira" in Charles's voice, and she's like, "Charles," and it's like, okay, so that's the thing that was signposted earlier. So we think that he's not officially still alive, if you like. It's a tease. And bear in mind, this is pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe, so people weren't conditioned to sit all the way through the credits, so a high percentage of the audience never saw that.
Yeah, this would have been like a very new thing.
They probably heard about it later. And of course, when we get to Days of Future Past, Magneto having all his powers and him being back is just never explained at all. Which is a problem with Days of Future Past, in my opinion, because it undercuts the stakes. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what happens to these people then, does it really? They'll just come back.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the idea of seeing the chess piece wobble. It's just like, but you just undone all that's you kind of done in this film. Like, you've taken away. Yeah, it just kind of makes the rest of the film pointless for me on then, because it's just like, well, you've just everything doesn't mean anything now, because all the interesting questions about there being a cure, well, if it's not actually a cure, it's just like,
well, it's one of two things.
From...
It's either a temporary cure, it's temporary alleviation, or it massively reduces your powers. So it's meant to be a happy ending for Rogue, but also reflecting well on the mutant community, that she goes back cured, and she's welcome, but she's still welcome. She's still one of theirs. They're not Magneto's divisiveness. Now, so is she going to be sleeping with Bobby in 6 months' time, and he gets rather unwell? I mean, it's just, yeah. I just think, again, it's almost Zack Snyder thinking. It's like, wouldn't it be cool if? And it's like, but you haven't thought about how it affects the rest of your film. It's thinking about a shot before thinking about the needs of the story. So I've never liked it, and I think I did see it. I have a feeling somebody said to me there was something at the end, which there never normally was. I did see this scene, and I never sat through all of the credits, so someone must have told me.
Yeah, it's one of those scenes which you just think, what?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, to just fans be like, and you think, yeah, that's not going to mean anything now, is it?
Oh well, whatever. So that's the end of X-Men: The First Last Stand. It's also, I mean, it was the end of a trilogy. I mean, the next film is going to be an Origins film. We'll talk about that in a bit, and then we're going to get sort of a reboot, and then we're going to sort of get hybrids with the sort of, some of this cast, some of that cast. This is the end of a story, and it's because they've lost their powers. So when they do suddenly come back in 2024 with all their powers and everything, it's just it is odd, and I just think the film roundly shits on continuity. And whilst there are always continuity issues in every film series, I just think it just shows a bit of a lack of care here. And when you read these films are stuck out 11 months, 12 months after they're announced, you go, you don't really care, do you? You get filmmakers in who you hope care, and writers that you hope care, and you want the product to be good. No one makes films deliberately very few people deliberately make films to be shit. So I think you want it to be good, but you're not willing to put the care in to have like a proper character Bible, a continuity Bible, to give people like 2 years to make the film instead of under a year, or at least 18 months. Quantum of Solace had to be delayed because 18 months was ridiculous. They wanted to start on it soon after Casino Royale came out and get it in cinemas 18 months later, and they went, this is mental. And the end result was still rushed, and they're doing these in 11 months. Now occasionally you get a good filmmaker with a good idea and you get like First Class, but even then the effects are far, far weaker than they should be because it was rushed. And you think, well, if you'd given that an extra 6 months, there wouldn't have been any problems with it at all. The only other problems, about halfway through the film, Michael Fassbender just goes Irish. He just there is a specific point in the film. I think I'm right in saying it's the scene where he leaves the mansion or something. Or the scene where
he has quite an interesting accent, but then he's Irish.
But
anyway.
Then he suddenly forgets the posh English bit and goes just Irish. And by the time he's on the beach,
he slips into his natural.
By the time he's on the beach at the end, it is totally like, unlike my Murphys, I'm not bitter. It's just like...
But also, it's his Bond audition from way back in the day.
The scene in Argentina.
You know what? You cannot get a pint of Murphy's over here for love or money.
Really? Can you not? Not that I drink it, but...
No, it's all Guinness.
If you have a spare pint of Murphy's, write to us at expectustotalk@gmail.com.
If you're not bitter.
I don't like those drinks very much anyway. But yeah, so okay, I think that's my final thoughts on this film. Really, that I watched it yesterday, I think, and I didn't hate it. It's when I think what's coming with certainly the next film and the 2016 entry, I just think they are bordering on completely incompetent. This just takes a property that has been brought to the screen in its first two entries with a little bit of love, care and vision, and then just takes a script that was probably written with its first draft had kernels of things you could develop into extensions of the same thing, and then they've just rushed it through with a filmmaker who doesn't know the property, isn't that interested in the property, and think all young boys want to do is fuck. And so it's kind of like it's got hints of what made X2 a better film. It's got hints of some of the things we'll enjoy when we'll get to First Class, but we haven't really talked about it in reality. But there were, we forgot to mention, several weak effects. We mentioned there were weak effects, but then didn't come up with the examples. But there are like several weak effects in this film, so that feels rushed. All the scenes with any heart are rushed. You've got Rogue running off to get the cure the moment she sees her guy just talking to another woman, well, dancing with her, to be fair. And I just think like it is like Quantum of Solace in that if you gave it another half an hour and a bit more time, it could have been a better film. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, really. I mean, I think I probably had the better time with this film than either of you guys. I mean, it's a lot rushed. There's a lot of problems with the production. Stories are kind of all over the place, but I think it had one of like the zingiest and sort of certainly funniest scripts anyway. And I think from here, as we said before, it is kind of the start of the downward slope for the series. But still, there's lots of fun points to discuss. Michael Fassbender, for example, we're looking forward to discussing him. Also, a few other Bond actors pop up as we go through. It's a bit of a mess and it's rushed, and there isn't that kind of plot development there. And I think if you're a sort of hardcore fan of the comic, you might feel hard done by as lead characters are kind of fallen by the wayside, killed off in rather dramatic fashion. Great, really good casting, quite interesting to see the way it kind of builds up. Great big, set pieces, definitely. They are a little bit cliched. Some of the effects obviously don't hold up, as time goes on. But still, I still had a really good time with it. And yeah, for me, it's kind of the most enjoyable in the series. Until we all kind of go a bit downhill from here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I do enjoy this film. So it's not as bad, but then it's not particularly great either. I think we covered all pretty much what we really feel about it. It's just basically rushed and tied up at a bow in kind of that'll do kind of manner. Though it does have some ideas in there that have some worth. So yeah, it's probably one of the weaker ones, but one of the better weaker ones, I would say. But it's
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
I think I'd go along with that. I do wonder if there is, like, in my sort of unofficial 3 categories of X-Men film, is this a fourth with Dark Phoenix? It's because, as I say, there are 2 entries in this series from memory that I just thought were a lot worse than this. But I can also understand how anyone going to see this in 2006 would have been really, really disappointed, because from what we could tell from the first 2 entries, and even Superman Returns, like it or hate it, they were made with love, and you could feel like the care for what they were doing. And this one just feels like next entry, and thankfully it was developed enough before he came on board that they carried on some of the ideas, like the idea of a cure and stuff. But I mean, it kind of shits on Mystique, it really shits on Scott Summers. I think it takes away all Rogue's agency, and then finishes with I love you, and it's like, okay, alright, I love Lamp, but maybe I'd appreciate it more if I knew more about it, Chris. I don't know about you.
Think maybe some sort of facts would have helped you in.
Yeah, but it's not about facts, is it? Because if you race through facts like they raced through this film, alright, we get the gist of the knowledge, but how much did we really enjoy it?
So you're saying you want some enjoyment involved as well?
I think you've got to flesh it out with something enjoyable. I mean,
just make it stick.
Yeah, like fun. Yeah. They're both important. Can you help? Becca? Becca can do this. All right, then, Becca. It's amazing how we forget this is in the format every week.
I think you covered it yourself, pretty much.
That's fun, folks.
There we are. So yes, I think we've covered most of them, unfortunately. But I've got some extra bonus facts thrown in. Obviously, as mentioned at the top of the show, with a budget on £210 million, like $1 million even. I think in terms of the X-Men series, it was like one of the most expensive. But obviously, then along came Days of Future Past, which smashed it all into smithereens. For fact number 2, the last scene was obviously to have Magneto regaining his powers as he fiddled slightly with a chess piece, playing against a stranger who would have been Charles Xavier, somebody else in a different body. But obviously scheduling conflicts, these two couldn't film these scenes together, so they kind of bookend the end credits this way. Obviously, as we mentioned at the top of the show, Matthew Vaughn was scheduled to direct, but obviously had to drop out due to family and other reasons. But some other directors included Darren Aronofsky, Trigger Warning, Joss Whedon, Rob Bowman, and Alex Proyas. So it would have been quite an interesting film. Also, as you kind of mentioned, any comic book fans out there, if you're familiar with it, let us know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Cyclops was meant to be like one of, if not the main character, one of the main characters in the story arc in the comic. And then you see him for like all of, as you said, less than 5 minutes on the screen. So I think it does his character a great disservice. And then a little connection, as we've seen to previous series as well, a little fun fact. Simon Crane was a stunt coordinator on this film, having worked on GoldenEye and Star Wars Rogue One, plus many other movies. Plus, I didn't realise legendary makeup wizard Rick Baker was also credited as a special effects and makeup consultant on this film. So, yeah, there we are. Which I didn't know that. So I've learned a fun fact.
And that's fun, folks. Also, one of the things we've got to mention was Halle Berry nearly didn't do this film because she just was like getting pissed off over the lack of character development.
Well, I don't blame her, quite frankly. I would have complained.
So she I think she came in with a bigger salary. She managed to get a bigger salary, but also I think
couldn't they have thrown in an extra $500,000 and have a show of tits? They did that in Swordfish.
I think it was Catwoman like bombing hard that made her think, maybe I could do with a hit. So
wasn't this film a bit of a Swordfish reunion anyway? Because we'll see Halle Berry. Oh God, Vince. I'm Juggernaut.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman, yeah. It was a bit of a Juggernaut styly, a bit of a Swordfish reunion, this film. Compared to last week, which was a GoldenEye Bond reunion.
I mean, not necessarily in straight quality, but like, you know, it does put me in mind of like the Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. You've slightly dropped the ball. Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man 3.
It has slightly ruined a trilogy here, even though we haven't been as harsh to it as I'm sure a lot of listeners would imagine we were going to be. And it's still, as a standalone sort of trilogy.
Don't worry, we've got X-Men Oranges.
I was going to say it's more consistent than what's coming, because I think two of the 3, 4. I don't know, about 4 of the next 5 films I think are all right to one degree or another.
Yeah, they're okay. I think probably Apocalypse might be the absolute.
I haven't got as far as that. In my head, I've only gone as far as Day of Future Past there. And I think, well, next week is terrible. Week after, I really like. Week
Days
after
of Future
that,
Past goes
pretty
from the
good.
60s and 70s.
Days of Future Past is okay. In between that, you had the Wolverine in Japan, which I thought was okay.
Wolverine in Japan.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but it is inconsistent, and obviously what we've got coming next, we'll talk about it more next week. But this is a film that first introduced me to the illegal download, because they were going to release this and it leaked, but it leaked with its effects unfinished, and someone handed me a DVD of it. I didn't even ask for it. They said, "Oh, you like films? Here you go." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, I got that last night. It's this Wolverine film."
Keep it under the table.
And then I was a lot more like. Because I've not been initiated to this, and I do like to pay for product, I'm like, I don't know whether to watch this. And I thought, well, I'll watch it on the basis that I'm going to pay for it in the cinema anyway. And then I watched it, and it was so shit I never did. So I've never actually seen...
And it's been pirating ever since.
I have never seen next week's film with finished effects. But apparently...
Really?
But the finished effects apparently not much better.
I fell off my chair.
I know that there was literally green screen in some of them, but I think they finished Patrick Stewart at the end of the film, his effect, and that looked terrible, because I thought that hasn't got much more you can do with it. And I know that when he's accidentally destroying the bathroom, the same as Andrew Garfield did in this Amazing Spider-Man, that's pretty poor as well. But a lot of it is just like green screen and stuff like that. But it's also got him screaming over the body of a woman, which he did over Jean Grey this week, but it was almost like an internal pain. He didn't look up at the sky and sort of scream at God or something. But he does in the next film, because he's dating not Michelle Monaghan in the next film. Lynn, whatever she's called. She was also in John Carter. Lynn Collins. She was in John Carter. She was the two best things in it. If you've seen John Carter. But she's pretty good next week. But apparently, I think they went to try to get Michelle Monaghan and couldn't. And she is budget Michelle Monaghan, because she's got a very similar quality. But anyway, as for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at Cinetronics, because I find all the old episodes at cinetronics.co.uk.
You can find us on Twitter at Expect Us to Talk. You can just find us on Facebook, Twitter, obviously YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, Podbay, wherever you like to have us in your earballs. And you can also email us at expectedtalk@gmail.com.
So what is it we're covering next week, Becca?
Like Comedian Sigh, oh my gosh. Do you expect to talk will return with X-Men Origins Wolverine?